There will be no more tweets from Donald Trump. Twitter on Friday night suspending his account permanently, saying the decision was taken due to the risk of further incitement of violence. Trump had 88 million followers and said he used his account to go around the mainstream media to get his message out. But he was increasingly tweeting or retweeting misleading or false information, sometimes even disproven conspiracy theories.
This is a very big deal. I will say it's had a sense of inevitability. Remember, Twitter did temporarily suspend his account back on 2 days ago when the violent mob marched on the Capitol, and they required him to delete 2 tweets, and then they reinstated him and he made a few more tweets. But if you remember when they said that, they said further violations may result in permanent suspension, or language to that effect.
In the halls of Congress, calls are growing for Trump to be impeached. A group of Democrats has circulated the draft of the articles of impeachment against Trump that is expected to be taken up in the House as soon as Monday. It accuses Trump of high crimes and misdemeanors by inciting an insurrection, and says Trump has demonstrated he will remain a threat if allowed to stay in office. The White House called the articles of impeachment politically motivated and will only further divide America.
He must be removed from office.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who has said if Trump doesn't resign, she'll move forward with impeachment, is said to have yet to sign off on the final wording of the impeachment language. In a letter to her congressional colleagues on Friday, Pelosi called Trump unhinged and said she spoke to a top military commander about ensuring Trump's access to the nuclear codes was limited in his final days in office so he couldn't launch a nuclear war. With only 11 days left in Trump's presidency, it's unclear if that will be enough time for Congress to vote on impeachment. Yet Trump is facing the prospect of being the first president in U.S. history to be impeached twice.
In already less than 48 hours, we have over 150 co-authors of this article of impeachment, and that does show, I think, very strong momentum. We also have the fact that multiple people died in this attempted coup, and it's something we can't just ignore.
Pressure on Trump to step down is also gaining steam. The latest call comes from Republican Lisa Murkowski, a senator from Alaska, who told a local newspaper the president is no longer fit to serve out the end of his term. On Friday, President-elect Joe Biden announced the final group of his cabinet secretary picks and said fighting the pandemic and creating jobs remains his top priority. When asked if Trump should be removed from office, he said this.
I've had a number of my Republican colleagues, former colleagues, I used to serve in the Senate for a long time, call me. Many of them are as outraged and disappointed and embarrassed and mortified by the president's conduct as I am and Democrats are.
As for the rioters that set off the crisis, several were arrested on Friday, including this man, Richard Barnett, seen here in a widely circulated photo sitting at Nancy Pelosi's desk. The Department of Justice has issued 13 federal indictments related to the rioting, and more arrests are expected in the coming days. Trump tweeted from his official presidential account hours after his personal account was taken down. He said Twitter was trying to ban free speech and silence not only him, but also his supporters. Minutes later, those tweets were also taken down by the social media giant. Gabriel Elizondo, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Well, we have 2 correspondents on this story. In a moment, we'll speak to Natasha Ghanem, who's in Joe Biden's hometown, Wilmington, Delaware. And Patty Culhane is following all the developments from Washington, D.C. But first, more pictures are emerging from the moments Capitol Hill was overrun. And they appear to reinforce perceptions that a sparse police force was outnumbered and overwhelmed. 1 police officer was killed. Here's Andrew Chappelle.
A police officer is crushed in a doorway in the Capitol building, caught between an angry crowd and an outnumbered police force. A lapse in security on the stage where Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be sworn in as the U.S. president and vice president in a few days' time.
They broke the glass. Everybody stay down. Get down.
Inside the chamber, members of Congress took cover before supporters of President Donald Trump entered. Dozens have been arrested. They include Richard Barrett, who broke into Nancy Pelosi's office and later bragged on television about taking her mail.
The activities of those involved in this siege of our Capitol were violent, they were destructive, they resulted in tragic loss of life, and they threatened our nation's security. And those actions cannot be tolerated, and those people must be held accountable.
And it was amazing. We could see the president talk.
Some did not survive. Air Force veteran Ashley Babbitt was filmed attempting to enter the speaker's lobby through a broken window before being shot by an officer, a scene captured on several videos according to the journalism website Bellingcat. Officer Brian Sicknick died from injuries he suffered on Wednesday. Flags in the Capitol are being flown at half-staff in his memory. Police say some protesters were armed, including with homemade explosives. This person is suspected of leaving pipe bombs at the Democratic and Republican Party headquarters. Another man was arrested with guns and 11 bombs containing homemade napalm in his truck. Others are expected to be prosecuted. Many had not worn masks and were filmed. Health officials are also warning that the event could have spread coronavirus and may have consequences for public health. Andrew Chappelle, Al Jazeera.
Well, Patty Culhane joins us now live from Capitol Hill. And Patty, given the more dramatic footage that is emerging, it seems Congress really is gearing up to take punitive action against the president.
They really are. I think as early as Monday, you could see the U.S. House of Representatives vote to impeach Donald Trump again. Now, before it went through committee, they're going to do an expedited process because he only has, 11 days left in office. So an expedited process, they could vote as early as Monday, just need a simple majority. Then the question is, what happens in the Senate? The Senate has to have a trial. They don't necessarily have to have witnesses, as they proved the last time. The question is when. If all of the senators, all 100 of them, say we won't object, they could do it starting next week. That seems unlikely given that President Trump still has some allies in the Senate. So then January 20th, Joe Biden becomes president, and you could see the outgoing president facing an impeachment trial. There is legal precedent. You can impeach an official once they're out of office. If he is impeached, that's a tough order because they need 2/3 of the Senate to vote for it. Then they can have another vote with a simple majority and bar him from ever holding any public office again. So people in Washington are very angry, and they basically are saying that he just needs to go no matter how he does it. Listen to Nancy Pelosi.
Sadly, the person who's running the executive branch is a deranged, unhinged, dangerous president of the United States. And only a number of days until we can be protected from him. But he has done something so serious that there should be prosecution against him.
Well, I gather that the 25th Amendment is off the table.
No, it isn't. Nothing is off the table.
Patsy, the word unprecedented gets thrown around a lot, particularly in these past 4 years. But just taking a broader view, it's not just unprecedented, it's been traumatic, particularly for people in the city where you are right now. First, we had those violent Black Lives Matter protests. And then we've seen those shocking images beamed around the world from the Capitol. How are people in D.C. coping with this?
Not well. It's been a long couple of months, and culminating in the invasion of the U.S. Capitol. This has not happened since 1812, and it was the British who got into the Capitol the last time, not only American citizens. And there's growing concern about how organized this was. They came with zip ties. They came very close to being able to hold hostage or potentially harm about 70 members of the U.S. Congress. So as the days have gone by, we're learning more and more about how it happened, and some of the Capitol police officers behaving so brilliantly, trying to stand up to a mob that they were completely outnumbered by, and others who are going to be investigated for seeming to help the rioters. So there's just a lot to sift through. We're starting to see people being arrested, people who called it the best day of their life, and then once they're outed, lose their job, face criminal charges. They're saying they didn't mean to do it. There's a lot of feeling in this city that it's not over, because we're seeing social media, they're saying next weekend they're going to try again. It's a much more heavily fortified building and complex right now, but there's still a lot of palpable fear.
Quite. Patty Culhane there, bringing us the latest live from Capitol Hill. Patty, thank you very much indeed. Let's cross now to Wilmington, Delaware, where we can speak with Natasha Ghanem. Natasha, we've been hearing about the aftermath of what's essentially been 4 years of division that culminated in the shocking events that we saw in Washington, D.C. just days ago. Now, Joe Biden was elected on a promise to be the great unifier, to bring the country back together. But given that we're now talking about another possibly divisive impeachment proceedings, do you think President-elect Biden is likely to support that, particularly as he assumes the presidency on the 20th of January?
President-elect Joe Biden has said that with regard to impeachment proceedings, that is a decision for Congress to make. Reporters tried to nudge him numerous times on Friday during a news conference to see if he would elaborate, and he kept returning to the fact that this is a decision for Congress. He did, however, have a very harsh critique of President Trump. He said that he's been saying for months that Trump is not fit for office. He's an embarrassment to the country. He's not worthy of the office, and he's one of the most incompetent presidents in American history. But he says the question is not about removing President Trump from office. The question is, what happens between now and the less than 2 weeks before Inauguration Day? Biden says he is focused on he and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris being sworn in and then getting to work to, quote, immediately pass legislation that would bring economic relief to millions of Americans who are struggling, facing eviction, struggling to put food on the table, and to get funding to state and local governments. This was omitted from the previous stimulus package, and state and local governments need an assist. They need help with vaccine distribution. Biden says he plans to ensure that 100 million Americans get that vaccine in his first 100 days. He did talk on Friday about what happened on January 6th, that probably a day that will live in infamy in U.S. history, the rampage at the Capitol. He called the people who participated in that mob, he called them thugs, insurrectionists, domestic terrorists, white supremacists, and anti-Semites. And he says the Department of Justice needs to conduct an independent and thorough investigation. But again, it will be up to the Department of Justice to determine exactly what charges that they'll face. A recent PBS Marist poll reveals that almost half of Americans polled believe that steps should be taken to remove President Trump from office. But when you look at party affiliation, the picture gets a little different. More than 80% of Democrats think that Trump should be removed from office, but more than 80% of Republicans believe he should not be removed from office. President Trump has said that he will not attend the inauguration, and that, Biden says, was one of the few things that the two men can agree on. He says that Vice President Mike Pence is welcome to attend the inauguration in keeping with historic protocol. There is a historical precedent, by the way, of President skipping the inauguration of his successor, but that hasn't happened since the early 19th century. Biden has said that it's important for these traditional protocols to remain, and even as early as last week had said that Trump should attend the inauguration in keeping with these protocols. But that was before 5 people died in a deadly rampage at the U.S. Capitol.
OK, Natasha Ghanem there, live for us in Wilmington, Delaware. Thank you, Natasha. Well, let's stay with this. Joining us now from Bethesda in Maryland is Alan Lichtman. He's a professor at the American University and author of The Case for Impeachment and the Keys to the White House. It's good to have you with us on the news hour. We've got two parallel controversies really running side by side. We have another impeachment for the US president and Trump's banishment from social media. Do you think the two are interlinked in some way? Do you think that, you know, given Trump's power is often lain in his Twitter feed, do you think this Twitter ban means that it might be easier or more likely that he'll be impeached or removed from office?
The two are intimately tied together. Look, Donald Trump has never been held accountable for anything in his entire life. I am still baffled at how he walked away from 5 bankruptcies, paid nothing, and somehow got hundreds of millions of dollars in tax deductions. He wasn't held accountable for obstructing the Mueller investigation or shaking down a foreign power. Now he is being held accountable in 2 fundamental ways. He's about to become the first American president to be impeached twice by the full House. That's never happened. And he has his media platform taken away from him. He is a creature of his online voice. Without it, his voice is incredibly muted, and his influence over the next 4 years is going to shrink appreciably.
And that may be the case, but is his ban from Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, is it constitutional?
Of course it's constitutional. These are private platforms. They have a right to ban people, not arbitrarily, but certainly according to whether or not they pose a clear and present danger to the outbreak of violence. And Trump has proven that he has incited insurrection, incited violence, and that's how the ban on Twitter is intertwined with impeachment. And by the way, Trump's incitement of violence didn't start on Wednesday. It started 4 years ago. He has been flirting with violence. He has been lying to the American people. He has been trashing our democracy for 4 years. You know, I give absolutely no credit to hypocrites like Senator Lindsey Graham and Senator Ted Cruz, who at the 11th hour and the 59th minute of this administration are suddenly breaking with Donald Trump. They have enabled his attack on democracy and his incitement of violence for 4 years.
And quite, but the American Constitution, it protects the right of free speech. Is tweeting or expressing your views not free speech? I mean, are these platforms...
You misunderstand the Constitution. You misunderstand the Constitution. Yes, I have a right to free speech. That doesn't mean I can publish in the Washington Post or the New York Times or get on Al Jazeera and speech. You don't let anyone get on Al
absolutely,
Jazeera
but
and say
these
what they
social
want.
media, but these social media. I'm sorry to cut you off, but Al Jazeera, we're moderated by Ofcom. We're deemed to be we're subject to regulation, and it seems that these social media sites aren't. I mean, are they publishers? What are they? And does this role that they have, because they act like media companies?
They have a right, not arbitrarily, to decide who is going to publish, just as you have a right to decide who gets to speak on Al Jazeera. It's nothing to do with your being regulated. You don't just keep people off Al Jazeera who are violent. You are very selective in who you allow on Al Jazeera.
So do you think social media sites, they don't have any responsibility here at all? Because I know Conservatives are very upset about the fact that they feel that their speech is being curtailed, that their reach is being curtailed because they're not able to reach their large audiences. Do you not think that the social media companies are going to be facing some kind of backlash from Conservatives down I don't know, a legal route, or is there bound to be some reckoning with Conservative politicians somewhere down the line?
I'm sure there will be lots of protests. But look, one thing we've learned about Donald Trump and his followers, that they are very good at, they're masters of it, deflecting blame. It's always someone else's fault. It's not the fault of Twitter that Donald Trump is being banned from Twitter. It's Donald Trump's own fault for using Twitter as a vehicle for the incitement of violence. He has no one to blame but himself. If he wants to understand why he's banned from Twitter, he should look in the mirror. And lots of other individuals and groups have been banned from Twitter. This is not unique to Donald Trump.
OK, Alan Lickman, I'm afraid we're out of time. But it's great to get your thoughts and your expertise there. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Al Jazeera NewsHour.
Thank you. Very lively. Take care.